All right, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us this morning. The agenda, we're going to start off with a quick FAQ, so questions that have been asked in the last couple weeks to myself, Hannah, and Kale. Then we're going to move into breakout rooms. If everyone could mute themselves, that would be great. Yeah, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms, as I mentioned, and talk a little bit about where we are and concerns, any lessons learned, things like that. Then Kale and I are going to do a quick walkthrough of the template, the inventory report template, just with some tips and advice for filling it out. And then Hannah is going to take us through some example reports. So a few other municipalities that have done government operations greenhouse gas inventory reports that hopefully will be useful for you and as you start filling out your own. All right, so I will with that I will start with the FAQ. One second here. All right. Okay, so just a quick note, today is May 17th, so today is the deadline for the data collection. I know some of you aren't quite there yet, and that's fine. If I haven't spoken to you about where you are and how we can help you continue and complete this data collection, please let me know as soon as possible. So in terms of moving forward, if you haven't already uploaded data to ClearPath, you should do that at this point and upload all the data from your workbook, from your ICLEI workbook into ClearPath. Again, this is just for the data leads, but all the assumptions and methods that you're using in completing the data requirements should be documented. And as mentioned, please be in touch with us. Once you've completed the data component, Hannah and Kale would like to have a quick data quality check. So it's important that you reach out to them and let them know that you're done, and so that they can check your work to date. And then lastly, working in collaboration with the rest of the team, you should identify your key findings, and then copy and paste the graphs that have been generated for you in ClearPath into the inventory template. And again, you can work with the research and communication leads to get that done. Right, so as I just mentioned, work together as a team to generate the graphs and make sure that those graphs get into the report. And then in terms of the report itself, in the next month, you should be editing the report, the draft language, adding new sections, including the background, relevant work, your findings, and your recommendations. And I'll go over that in more detail today. And then, as I mentioned, when it's complete, please notify us and we will review it. And then the draft for the due date for the draft inventory report is the next meeting, which will be June 21st. So in terms of those next two meetings, the next one being June 21st and the subsequent one being July 19th, we are hoping to do one of those meetings in person and to have presentations of your draft reports. If you are done on the early side, you might go first. If you're not done, we can wait as well. So we'll play this one a little bit by ear. Also, please let me know if you have a strong preference in terms of meeting in person or continuing on Zoom. obviously the pros and cons of both, but we will need to make a decision about having one of these next meetings in person. Okay, so moving right along, here are the questions that have come up most recently, and Kayla or Hannah, if you want to jump in at any time, please feel free to do so. The first question, employee commute, should we include part-time staff? This is optional. I think generally this information is pretty hard to get, but if you can get it, you can include it, but it's not necessary. Why is that? Because it's usually a relatively small number compared to the standard number of municipal employees, and they of course are seasonal, so they only work for a short time, and oftentimes they live in the municipality, so they walk to work. So overall, their contribution is relatively small. So bottom line, you don't need to include it, unless, of course, you want to. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Should we include food composting and yard waste? So the question there is, does your government own and operate the compost facility or the yard waste facility? If no, then these are scope 3 and not mandatory. As mentioned, if the sector is less than 5% of total emissions, it is not considered significant enough to warrant inclusion. Again, this is optional. If you want to include it, you can. It's really about what you want to track and what you think would be important and significant in terms of managing your emissions moving forward. But it's interesting to note that if your government is picking up yard waste or compost, then those emissions will be included in your fleet emissions. So in a way, these components are being included to a certain extent if you do have a program in your municipality. Question 3, where do the EV chargers go in the workbook and in ClearPath? The EV charger should—
Mary, your voice just cut out. I don't know if it's just for me.
There
you go. You're back. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Where do the EV chargers go in the workbook in ClearPath? So the EV charger should be included in the buildings and facilities tab. So the electricity charges associated with the EV chargers, they may be included in your Central Hudson bill, or they may be under a separate account. You might want to just double check that if you have them. I would also recommend noting information about the chargers, the quantity, the make and model, and if they're open to the public, and potentially the charge sessions and utilization rates. Again, this is all optional, but when you get to the climate action plan, this is one of those things that might be helpful for you to track, because one rule of thumb is that if a charger has utilization rates greater than 25%, that's when you want to think about adding more chargers. Obviously, there are lots of factors that go into that decision, but again, it's just data that will help you manage your chargers and your emissions moving forward. Is it okay if I can't figure out what is street lights versus traffic signals versus other lighting? And of course, this goes back to your Central Hudson bill, where it's not that clear in some cases. And the bottom line is, yes, it's okay to lump them all together. But if you can figure out streets versus parks versus traffic signals, you will be then able to manage them better. So that would be ideal if you can figure it out. You can also say, I don't know what these lighting accounts are. I assume they're associated with these parks, and then speak to what ideally you'll do moving forward, which is ideally you'll call them out and be able to understand which accounts tie to which facilities in subsequent inventories. You could also reach out to your Central Hudson contact. I think for most of you, that's Brian Finn. He might be able to give you some more clarity on your lighting accounts. Trees, should we include trees as a carbon sink? And if so, how do we do that? So carbon sinks are scope 3, so they're not mandatory. But if you did want to include them, there is a place to do that in the buildings and facilities section. So please reach out to Hannah. I'm not going to go into detail about that now, but Hannah will be able to walk you through how to do that. Am I speaking correctly there, Hannah? I don't want to.
I don't think it's in building to facilities. I think it's in a different one.
Okay,
If people want to include it, we'll just have to do a little workaround.
gotcha. Okay,
Can be, but
thank
it's,
you.
let me know if you are interested.
Okay, great. Um, right, but just a quick note that they're generally more common in the community greenhouse gas inventory.
Yes, 110%.
Fantastic, thank you. Question 6, off-road vehicles. What if we can only get vehicle hours and vehicles hours of operation, but not fuel or miles per gallon? Is that enough? So it's yes and no. I think you can use that, but ideally you would include other data to help you have a more accurate estimate. So for instance, the vehicle make and model, the fuel type, miles per gallon on highway versus streets. And obviously you can get more accurate data from additional, if you can get this additional data. And again, just remember to document your process and assumptions that you've made in coming up with these numbers. Are there any other deliverables besides the report? So I just mentioned this because while they're not mandatory from a climate smart communities perspective, they are highly encouraged as some of the important outcomes of doing this. One is contacts, right? Knowing who to contact to get you these numbers moving forward will be really important for anyone doing this work after you. And maybe you've uncovered some resources that will be helpful for you in managing your facilities or your fleet, et cetera, moving forward. So make sure to note those in ClearPath or in your report as well, if you'd like. And establishing a process is really highly emphasized so that next time you do this, again, you have data collection templates and that you can quickly find those and send them to the right people moving forward. I remember Chow from the town of Northeast talking about how they had come up with this great template for collecting all of the needed data as it came in on a monthly basis, just to make this process more smooth moving forward, which I thought was really impressive. And then again, resources and internal ownership, just making sure that you have a sense moving forward who within the municipality will own this process and this deliverable when you do it the next time. What would be in a community inventory that is not in this inventory? I know we've had a lot of back and forth around the community inventory versus the government operations inventory. So I just wanted to clarify that you do cover the same 6 sectors in the community inventory, but again, it's the entire community. So it's the government operations is a very small subset of what you would cover in terms of the quantity of emissions in your community greenhouse gas inventory. So you're looking at a more comprehensive approach. And that's why things like carbon sinks make more sense to include in the community inventory. You're also looking at what benefits the entire community, and trees, obviously the oxygen they're producing is a community-wide benefit. Question 9, do I have to explain how I got my numbers in inventory or the inventory report? Yes, please make sure you do explain your calculations and any assumptions made. I mean, obviously, if you just got data from Central Hudson, then that's nothing really to explain there, but any calculations you did really need to be very clearly noted. And I have seen, the Climate Smart Communities staff, when they review these submissions, they're pretty strict. If they don't understand how you got a number, they'll ding you. So just make sure that you kind of remember that as you go through this process, to make it as easy for them to understand your numbers as possible. And you can do this in the inventory report itself or in the supporting documentation. So should we include scope 3? I think people are kind of on the fence on this point in some cases. I think we've said many times already, it's highly recommended that you include employee commute and solid waste, especially if it's significant. In many cases, the solid waste is not. So in that case, you know, it's not as highly recommended. And then this, you know, this is a question you just want to ask yourselves, right? Like, is it important for us to collect and report on this data in terms of managing our greenhouse gas reductions or managing costs moving forward? So it's, again, it's really up to you, but you might, you know, keep that question in mind as you make your decision. And also it's a capacity question, right? So if you can't do this work moving forward, then you should probably not do it at this point. And just sort of, this is an interesting fact to note that for governments that don't have a significant refrigerant leakage or don't operate a landfill or wastewater treatment plant, the building and facility energy use, the fleet fuels and the streetlights tend to account for 90% of your GHG emissions. So I have seen many greenhouse gas inventories that just cover those three sectors. So, you know, there is kind of quite a divergence in terms of how much detail goes into these. Yes, we'll absolutely review your report. That's what we're here for. We obviously can't write it for you, but we definitely want to review it. We want to help edit it. And if you have any questions, of course, please come to us. And just a reminder, when you have completed your report, please remember to upload it to your municipality's website. That is a requirement for Climate Smart Communities. That is it for me. So I will stop sharing now. And we can move on to breakout rooms. But just before we do that, does anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, we're going to.
I have one quick one.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
lawnmowers off-road vehicles?
They are, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do something a little different this time. We're going to actually do, several rooms as usual, but we're going to automatically assign them. So hopefully that will work here. I just want to make sure that we're doing this. Sorry, I'm just going to take a minute to do this. I don't know, Hannah, if you want to talk a little bit more about the example reports while I'm doing this. And also, Kale, I don't know if you wanted to add anything based on our conversations at this point, just while I'm quickly doing these breakout rooms.
Gail, if you want to jump in, my report review will take a little bit longer.
No, I don't think I have anything extra to add. I'm hearing that a couple of communities are nearing the finish line on their inventory. So that's exciting. And just want to remind that we have this final report template. There's work to be done for the communications side, as well as the data side. So if you feel like you're getting, you know, around the bend with your work and you want to have some time with us here on the ICLEI team to talk through how to finish up your report, we're here for that. Much of the rest of our conversation today will be about this as well. And so just want to give that call out that some folks are finishing up. And if you are thinking that's not you anytime soon, make sure that Mary and Hannah and I know that, so that we can help you kind of fast track here in the last month or so that we have to work on the inventory. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Cal. I also just want to quickly thank Hannah, who has been so fabulous stepping in. I know, you know, Caroline has been out, so Hannah has graciously stepped in her spot, and she's been so helpful. So I wanted to thank her, and also to quickly introduce Rebecca Weinstein, who is on the call. She is a new intern and will be helping on a number of different initiatives regarding CAPI. So just want to welcome her. And now I'm going to put you all randomly into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, and then we will reconvene and talk more about the report template. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
I thought it would be fun to mix it up a little bit today. So we have a number of different municipalities represented here. And for those of you who who haven't met Rebecca, I don't think any of you have. She is joining us. She's a sophomore at Vassar and is really interested in climate planning. So we're thrilled to have her aboard. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Rebecca.
Nope, that's good.
All right. So how's everyone doing? Kelsey, do you want to start? I know we have a meeting soon to discuss your progress, but I don't know if there's anything you want to share at this point about challenges or kind of where things stand with the inventory.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we are behind, as you could probably imagine. So just for those who don't know, I'm assisting with Dutchess County's inventory. So we're still waiting on Central Hudson data. Unfortunately, a lot of the information we need is from folks that are outside of the planning department, which is kind of heading up this effort. So it is just taking a really long time to round everything together. So Devin Regolino from the planning department is kind of making the effort to kind of outreach to a lot of these other partners and other departments. And I don't actually have a huge update on where he is, especially with regard to some of the buildings and facilities information from DPW. So yeah, we're actively working towards this, but recognizing that we might not have as much time to put together the written portion of the inventory, which hopefully we'll be able to handle once we get the inventory put together. So that's where we are. It's not that fabulous, but I'd be curious to see if anybody in this group is nearing the finish line and how that's gone for you.
I think the most likely candidate for that leadership role would be probably the Village of Rhinebeck. I don't know, Michael, if you want to talk a little bit about where you guys are.
Yeah, I think we actually have a pretty good clerk who keeps track of all our fuel usages and electrical usages. And so we have pretty good records. I'm sure we've got more than 95% of everything into ClearPath. Now, there's the little stray things which are kind of confusing me, like emissions from grid usage. I'm not sure what that means and how you calculate that. And refrigerant leakage. I'm not sure how you calculate that. And
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this. I'm sure that Kale and Hannah have a more detailed answer, but sort of the bottom line is there that you can use the defaults from ClearPath. If they're not in there, we should let Hannah know because they should be. I think the default for leakage for natural gas, for instance, is 0.3% of your total natural gas amount. That's an EPA number that they use. But again, those come really from ICLEI. And they tend to, in some cases, make those numbers as specific as possible based on the region we're in and the utility that you're using. But in some cases, they're sort of more national numbers.
okay, I'll look at those again.
Okay.
We did the one strange thing is we did the tree CO2 avoidance sequestering, and we have a tree commission, and they calculated it, and we plugged that number. They calculated it in, it blew everything out it wiped out all of our emissions. So it seems like it's not right.
Wow, that's exciting. I mean, that doesn't seem right, but that's so interesting.
So I have to go back to them and see how they got that calculation, but I took it out because it skewed everything in the wrong direction. So
that's fascinating. I know you have a lot of trees in Rhinebeck, but still that seems.
I think it's only supposed to be trees that are it's not private trees, it's just trees that are managed by the village,
right?
Which are street trees. And we have an active street tree planting program, so there's a lot of new trees in the last 5 years.
Michael, would you mind when we go through the sort of the Hannah's portion of the agenda, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the group? I'm sure people would find that really interesting. And just kind of an
Okay.
update, give an update on where you are, because I know, you know, she wanted to just call a few people out, and it seems like that's something that people would find interesting, and just, you know, generally kind of want to understand more about. I wasn't sure where do you put that? Is that was not in the
I
building?
think it's under the build. I think it is under the buildings.
I thought so too. Oh well, we can maybe Hannah.
But I think we're more fortunate in some of these bigger communities where we have no natural gas and we have no transit system and we have no landfill. But we do have water and wastewater, which seem to be take a big chunk of the they use a lot of electricity to pump water around. And
How
that's
about
probably
and wastewater too? You
and
have
wastewater. Yeah. So that's probably about half of our is running those two facilities takes about half the greenhouse gases the village uses.
Okay, so you guys own and operate those facilities,
Yes.
and are they just for the village of Rhinebeck, or?
Just for a portion of the village, actually. It'd be
Okay.
nice if it was extended, but you know, there's right now there's no funding for that. But you know, the downtown community is so close together that they can't have septic systems, so they have to have a sewer
Okay.
system. And the water system goes for probably about half the village.
Okay,
Some people still have wells.
interesting. And you said you included solid waste or no?
No,
No, okay, okay.
because we don't have a landfill, but there is small categories like food waste in the municipal offices. I think all those things are really small compared to
Right.
the electricity use, and the fleet vehicles are pretty big too. We have a
Yeah.
highway department, a lot of vehicles.
Was that your largest sector of the pie, or?
No, the largest is the water and
Oh,
wastewater.
the wastewater, right, of course. You mentioned
Yeah,
that.
the fleet vehicles are second, and street lights are a small piece.
Okay,
But yeah, the report, the first time I looked at it was today. That template is what's the intended audience of that report?
public.
Is it public? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is just to upload it to your website, and it's I think to a large extent, an educational tool. That's why there's a lot of that boilerplate language in there to just help people understand kind of why this is being done and why it's important.
Okay.
What were you going to say? You think it's a little bit too wonky, academic?
No, I just skimmed through it, but it be better if it was more specified to the village. Maybe take out some of the photos and put some photos in from
Yes,
our facilities. And
that is the intent. Definitely.
okay,
Yeah, I'm going to go through it. So we'll talk more about that later. I don't know, Kristen, if you wanted to talk a little bit about how you guys are doing.
Sure. So long as we're actually getting locks put on our doors. So I apologize in advance if it gets really loud and I have to mute.
No worries.
But yeah, so unfortunately in the past few weeks, I was actually out of the office for a number of days and just haven't had some time to recollect or just collect my thoughts on the last meeting we had in April. But if you recall, I was asking quite a few questions about how to classify some of the inventory data. So I think on the collection side, we're doing okay. I do need to follow up with our police department to see if I can get some of that employee commute data. But we did manage to collect a lot of that already. And I know that's sort of like an extra component, but we thought it was worth noting and trying to get a handle on for this inventory because we are, there's staff that's scattered kind of all over and we are such a large municipality,
Yeah.
just like geographically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just have to get in and find a chunk of time, which actually today, this afternoon, will be that time to start kind of really paring down the data and getting organized. I know Mike, Jay, and Susan and I are planning to set up a call too, or a meeting just to be able to figure out how, like what it is we're trying to do with the data too, right? Like what are we trying to get out of this? What policies perhaps, or so that conversation hopefully will be happening within the next week or two with Memorial Day thrown in, but hopefully we can get something on the calendar. And again, I've downloaded the report, so sort of like it's not on the drive, but like I have something working in the background. So I've been able to kind of look through that and see what the expectations are for that. And yeah, so
Great.
just kind of plugging along. It's really just been managing my time versus like other responsibilities.
Yeah,
So
no, of course. I know you all have so much on your plate. And this is a lot, but I just was going to say one thing, which is that in terms of the why, like why are we doing this report and what do we hope to get out of it? I mean, certainly you can start thinking about that now, but that's really going to be the focus for the next phase, which is the climate action plan. And I think, you know, what you want to think about now is just really, you know, what do we take away from the data, right? Like on a high level. And then as we move into the climate action plan, it's like, okay, based on our forecasts, how do we want to parse out and prioritize recommendations to get down to our goals, to our targets.
Right.
So that just, it's all to say, like it is coming. And I think, you know, given your time constraints, I wouldn't worry too much about that now. That's all.
Yeah.
These, you know, these inventory reports really don't have to be very detailed. They're really just reporting out what you've found. And then the recommendations will come in the climate action plan.
Sounds good.
Okay. And Kay, how is the town of Pleasant Valley doing? Okay. Did we lose you? We can't hear you if you're speaking. Oh shoot, time is up. All right. Well,
Can't hear me if I don't unmute.
oh shoot. Okay. Now we don't have very much time. Do you want to just give a really quick summary?
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
I just wanted to find out how things were going, but unfortunately now
We're
our
coming
time is
along.
up. Okay.
We have a very good intern from Vassar who does a very efficient job of inputting the data that we collect from the various town organization, compartments. And I'm basically getting the information from the highway department, which unfortunately prior to 2020 was not computerized. So collecting some of their data can be challenging.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much. I'm sorry that things are up now, but oh dear. I apologize to Kay there for, I think she got a little cut off.
All right, I think I'm back. All right,
We can hear you now, Richard.
strange happened.
All right, thank you all. And I have to apologize to Kay. She got a little cut off there, but Kay, I do want to hear more, and hopefully we can sync up later this week or early next week.
Fine, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to Hannah, who's going to talk a little bit about, oh wait, sorry, I apologize, Hannah. Actually, I think Kale and I are up now. We're going to talk about the inventory template, and then you're going to talk about some example reports. So let me share my screen again here. So I'm just going to walk through the template that should be in all of your SharePoint folders at this point. You can also find it on the CAPI website. So if you ever need another copy, you can, again, always download it from there. So I'm just going to quickly try and hit on some of the, I think, more important things to keep in mind as you walk through this. I think most of you are pretty familiar with Word, and so I won't get into too much detail, but I would say this is an interactive table of contents that sometimes can be a little bit tricky. I know for me, I just had to remind myself how to update that table of contents. So if you go in Word under references, you should see something that just says update table of contents update, and you click on that, and then it will automatically update with new, if you've added any subheadings or any kind of headings, those will be incorporated into the table of contents. Also, another tip that I find really useful, if you bring up the table of contents in a left navigation pane in the document, it allows you to very easily jump around from section to section within the document. So in order to bring that up, you go under View, and then you click on Navigation pane, and the navigation pane should show up on your left side of your screen. And again, then you can just click on different sections and jump from section to section more easily. All right, so moving right along, we have here a list of all the tables and figures. Obviously, if you delete some of those, that's fine. And if you add them, just make sure you update your table after you've made all those changes. The executive summary does really not have to be very long. It should be, I think, a page maximum. And again, Kale, feel free to jump in here and talk more about that. But you really don't have to have too much included in that section. I think you can talk a little bit about the background that your municipality has done with regard to sustainability. I would emphasize that you just keep that to work that has been focused on reducing emissions as opposed to sort of all of your environmental work, just to kind of keep it more manageable and focused on this emissions reduction goal. And also just to note that anything you write here can be repurposed for the climate action plan. As you know, we're all moving into the next phase when this is done, which is to write the climate action plan. And that's really where you'll get into more detail about what you've done and what you recommend the municipality does moving forward. So just keep in mind that, this will all be folded into the larger process moving forward, and you can keep it pretty short at this time. Kale, do you want to add anything more there?
Yeah, no, you said it great. That all of us here in CAPI are in a kind of unique position because we're completing the inventory as a piece of a broader climate action plan, and we know where we're headed right at the outset. That's not always the case with every community. Often we're making a greenhouse gas inventory as kind of its standalone moment. That's going to be the climate action work that we're presenting to the community for the next, year, couple years. And so we're setting the scene, which requires a longer document, maybe something more substantive that you're going to present out on. For the purposes of our CAPI, I mean, you're not maybe going to even need an introduction much. That might be a sentence that's like, we did this as part of CAPI. This is a really cool program. And then your executive summary or just your top takeaways. So like a page. You can see on the screen here, this key findings. Similar thinking, you might decide the key findings and your executive summary are combined. So this template, I know Mary's going to get into this. I don't want to overstep, but this template is providing you more than enough information so that you're able to edit it down and not having to feel like you're adding a bunch of extra. So you're welcome to make this your own and know that that bigger narrative is in your climate plan that we'll all launch into here in another month or two. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Cal. That's great. So here is where you will put your pie chart. I know we've seen a lot of other pie charts, but this will be yours. And again, it can be as simple as lighting, fleet, buildings, and employee commute, for instance, or even just the big three. Hopefully you have a few more to add if it makes sense for your municipality, but I've seen some that just have 3 sectors. So just to kind of keep in mind. The next section is all boilerplate. And like Kale said, feel free to either keep it, edit it, or delete it. So it's really up to you. Just remember that all of these words or phrases that are in yellow should be should be updated to as directed, basically. Like in this case, obviously you put your own jurisdiction in here. So, and again, just remember, if you delete something, the footnote should automatically delete, but you'll just want to check those to make sure. This section here, that's all in yellow, it's particularly important to edit that because it's not at this point focused on our region, right? Dutchess County. So if you want to, you could see down here at the bottom of the page, they've referenced something called the National Climate Assessment. I did look into that, and it looks like, this is from chapter 19, that it looks like chapter 18 actually deals with the Northeast. So, it has some good sort of headline facts that you could leverage for your own, for instance, like by 2035, it's projected to be more than 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit warmer on average than during pre-industrial era. So those are the kinds of things that, you can just put right in here. If there are others that you think are more specific to the region or more powerful, obviously include those as well. This graphic on the right, you can either delete it or input one from your own municipality. And yeah, just again, make sure if you do put in other facts and figures that you footnote them. So other people know where you're getting your information from. But the National Climate Assessment is one very good source, I think. Okay, so moving right along. So again, we have more boilerplate text here, which you can do what you want with. I would say on this graphic in particular, you're welcome to use your own. I know a few cohort meetings ago, Kale talked about some great potential sources for climate related graphics or programs to create them. So those are on the CAPI website under shared resources and visual aids. So feel free to, again, swap this out with something just to make sure that if it is a graphic, that it does, obviously add meaning. And I think the why is more important than the how at this point, right? Like, why are we doing this? And the how is going to be more covered in the next phase, the climate action plan. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to just pipe in or put them in chat. I don't know if Hannah maybe or Kayla, you guys can keep an eye on the chat. That would be great. Okay, so the major milestones. Again, you can keep this or delete it. This process, the framework and this graphic in particular are, they're ICLEI specific, but this framework has become a pretty well-established framework for this work. So, it's fine to keep it if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there to say, Mary, thanks. You'll see this reference to like the ICLEI milestones, etc. ICLEI pioneered this work 30 years ago. And like Mary's saying, it's very standardized, but you can also refer to this as like the accepted standard for how local governments complete climate action. If you don't want this to be like an ICLEI sales pitch in the document, totally fine. Just wanted you to know where this this diagram and such is coming from. You could even just put in the footnote like this graphic is attributed to ICLEI, and then that's going to be enough for us in this section.
Great, thanks, Cal. So again, next section is boilerplate. You can change the color of this graphic or its size if you want. Again, all edits are fine here. We are up to the 6th assessment. So the IPC right here should say IPCC 6th assessment report. And these are 6th assessment values. I don't know, Kale, if the table 1, do you want to talk about that? Like, is this still updated? Is this all good?
I'll actually ask Hannah. We had a short discussion about this yesterday on using the 6th assessment versus what's here. Any updates you want to share, Hannah?
Yeah, so the 6th assessment and the 5th assessment are very, very similar. So that's why, so ClearPath has been using your 5th assessment values. So these global warming potentials that you have in this table right now is what's calculating within ClearPath. So we just haven't had like the capacity to build in the 6th assessment values as it is like a core to all of the calculations on the back end of ClearPath at this time. So I would potentially just have it say that these are 5th assessment values at this. I think you guys are going to finish before we get the 6th assessment values into ClearPath is what I'm trying to say.
Great, thank you for
Yeah.
that important distinction. Okay, so the next section, again, this is all pretty standard. These 3 sectors here, you know, they're not inclusive in many cases, probably, right? Like some of you are doing off-road vehicles, or solid waste or refrigerants that aren't included here. So, you know, obviously you can edit these as needed. Lighting is included, I believe, in the buildings and facilities, but if you want to break that out and mention it separately, that's fine too. So again, you can edit as you need here. Okay, so the base year for, I think, all of you except for Beacon will be 2019. Since Beacon already had done 2019, I believe you're doing 2022, Ben, is that right?
I believe 21.
21, sorry, okay, 21.
Hi.
Again, this
Yes.
this photograph here is from,
Okay.
I would guess from
I'm not
Florida.
exactly sure what time, but it'll be
Oops.
around.
Sorry, Rich,
Yeah.
could you maybe
I'm just
mute yourself?
I'm just pop in and say hello.
Hey, Rich, could you mute yourself, please?
Okay. Okay. Okay, I've got to go. I'm on a meeting. Okay, bye.
Sorry, Rich, we can hear you, but that's
I'm sorry.
no worries. Okay, so I was just saying if you could you know, update this with a photograph from your municipality or just delete it altogether. That works too. So this is where we get to the actual part of the inventory. This is your results, and this will come directly from ClearPath. You can delete lines that you don't have any data for. You can also report out on individual greenhouse gases like methane or CO2 or NO2. And this column over here, the MTCO2E, is the metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That will come right from ClearPath. So all of these numbers will come from ClearPath. So, you know, it's really a matter here of just cutting and pasting. Hopefully that's clear to everyone. This right here, the fugitive emissions from natural gas distribution, I believe is a 0.3% default. That's according to the EPA. And this is a requirement for the LGO protocol. I don't know if Hannah or Kale, you want to say more about that. These fugitive emissions, you know, are something, again, that need to be input. I'm not sure if they're already included in ClearPath or whether people have to enter those separately.
The process and fugitive emissions are going to come from taking all of your aggregated natural gas. You're going to take all your natural gas usage, combine that into one giant number. And then there's going to be a calculator within the process and fugitive sector called emissions from natural gas distribution. I believe it's the last one. And that one's going to apply a standard leakage rate of 0.3. So then it accounts for leakage of your natural gas for the municipal operations. I do not actually believe that this is required. It's just in here because we always use it. So whenever we're doing a project, we always include process and fugitive emissions. I like it though, so I highly recommend doing it. It's a really easy lift, so highly recommend.
Thanks, Hannah. It's good to know. Okay, so This is also where you're going to, this is a section where you're going to put in any optional charts that you decide make sense for your municipality. So this could be, for instance, emissions by scope. I've seen a whole lot of different charts, all kinds of charts in this section. I've seen, for instance, you can do emissions by department or emissions by department building. Or you could do, for instance, emissions by firehouse. I know a lot of municipalities have multiple firehouses, so comparing those sometimes is interesting. I've seen a department's vehicle fleet comparison. So, you could compare the police fleet to the DPW fleet. You could also compare lighting from different streets or from different areas, or for instance, the baseball park versus the tennis court park, or whatever it is that you find most interesting and most useful for kind of making a point or, drawing attention to something moving forward. So this will come a bit out of your results, but just kind of worth mulling over what you think makes most sense for your municipality. And then also, this is where right here, next steps, this is where you're going to point out what you weren't able to identify. So I know for a number of you, there was, it's tricky to determine really what accounts are which lights. So here's where you could say something like, we weren't able to identify certain streets or distinguish between street lights and traffic lights, but moving forward, this is something we'll try to obtain moving in the future. Or you could say, for instance, we weren't able to get off-road emissions or refrigerants or from heat pumps or things like that. But it's important that if you can't get data or you've made some assumptions based on your data, that you do point out that there's a need to address that moving forward. I don't know, Kayla or Hannah, if you want to say something more there. No,
I don't really have anything. You're
okay.
good.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure. Okay, so conclusion. This is a long conclusion. The second and third paragraphs seem to be boilerplate. So, I mean, it's all boilerplate, but particularly these two sections. So if you want, you can cut this out altogether, or you can edit it to, be more specific to your municipality. I think the first paragraph is kind of important, that we've just completed milestone 1 of this 5 milestone framework. And you can even mention that you're moving on to complete a climate action plan here and address CAPI if you want. The other thing you could do here at the end, which I've seen in other reports, is you can talk about what to consider for the CAP. So, you've mentioned your next step, you're going to complete a climate action plan. And in that climate action plan, you might want to consider for inclusion things like increasing energy efficiency or renewable energy investments and infrastructure and vehicle fuel economy. So again, keeping it pretty high level, but just referencing some of the main topic areas that you'll want to be addressing as a result of doing this inventory. And then I've also seen people mention other benefits to doing this work besides the emissions reductions, such as cost savings and improving the economic vitality and quality of the municipality, things like that. So just to keep that in mind, it's up to you, but you don't need to go crazy on this, and hopefully it shouldn't be too much work to do this section. Lastly, the appendix, which usually is not very important, I think in this case is, I would argue, pretty important, because this is where you explain how you got your numbers. And I think I've mentioned several times that Climate Smart Communities is really strict about this. They do want to understand all your assumptions. If you didn't directly get a number from the data source, but you've estimated certain elements of of the number, you know, you really do need to include that here. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I think you see here that it asks for the data source. It asks for assumptions, so you can include it here, or you can just write it below. And of course, you can, you know, delete sections that aren't relevant to your plan. So that is pretty much it for me. I don't know if Kel or Hannah, you wanted to add anything more, or if anyone had any questions. But if not, I'll hand it over to you, Hannah, to talk a little bit more about some of the example reports.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to share my, Mary, can you make me a co-host?
Yes, I have done that. Yep.
Perfect. So actually, I'm going to show you guys first where you can look within ClearPath to find some of that information that is required for the report. I don't know if we went over that before. So I'm going to start with that, and then we're going to look at two different report examples. And it's really just going to show that you created this inventory, but it's really up to you how you'd like to present it. And we'll pop right in. So I'm going to be looking over at my other screen over here. But if we're looking at, this is a California community. It's just one that I had up today. But these all look the same. So again, we're in our government track over here. These are our different modules that we're working within. Your inventory lives right here. And then we're going to go over to reports, actually. So this report section is going to have all of these different options to look at different ways to interpret your information. So let's just say you want to, or you're going to use that standard report template that we were looking at with those tables, and you need that usage information and then also those metric tons. What you're going to do is you're going to go to CO2e by sector for the selected inventory year. So you're going to hit view, and that's where you're going to find those CO2e values. It also has some awesome graphics here that you guys can screenshot. You can also have the option to download them right here and plop those into your report as needed. So there is one shortfall of the government side, is that it doesn't have one report that has the usage unit and the metric tons in it. So you're going to have to use the usage unit from your actual inventory, which is your activity data. And then you're going to collect that metric ton value from these reports over here. You also have the option to look at it by scope and sector, just scope, just sector, and then you have a really detailed reports here. So let's say if you need extra information for climate smart communities or anything along those lines, all of that can be found within these as well. You're also able to export them as sheets, anything along those lines to help make it easier to look at that information. Any questions on that before I go into some reports? All right, hearing none. So now we're just going to look at two report examples from New York communities. So we're just looking at a government operations inventory here for Newcastle. One thing that I really like that they did is they just made this very simple and to the point. I think that since you guys are building out climate action plans, it can really help cut down on time needed to just make a bare bones report for your inventory. So they have a quick little summary right here, along with their the town and the different sectors that they covered. Then they go into, again, like what kind of sectors they covered right here. They have these graphics here that you can make within Word. And then you also have these as well, which I believe are from Excel. So they just probably exported their information, did a little zhuzhing up of making those graphics, and then they plop that right in here. I'm going to say that this methodology section and or the appendix in our ICLEI template is going to be your most important. I think this is going to essentially come from the fact that Climate Smart Communities is really looking for that detailed information and for you to all to be very clear about any assumptions that you are making. So I find it very important that you guys do spend some more time on the methodology and or the appendix within your report, depending on whatever layout you choose. And again, with our ICLEI template, y'all can rearrange that however you want. So if, let's just say, if you want the table up front, go for it. If you want the methodology to not be at the end and you want it up the front, go for it. However you choose to customize and whatever works best for you, your community, and your capacity is completely up to you and what works. So again, we have that baseline year here, and then that's what we have in our template as well. Some of these methodology sections, they've taken some of that boilerplate language and just adapted it to fit what they're looking for in this report right here. Again, we have our other table, and then we did a scope framework right here, or they did. So one thing I like to mention is that we are talking about scopes. However, when communicating this to your community, I find it very valuable to focus on sectors instead. So yes, we are looking at scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. However, communicating that the local government is going to be focusing more attention on your buildings and facilities emissions versus scope 1 is going to resonate with your citizens better for the most part. I tend to see that it pulls better and or that it works better when people try to communicate it that way by sector based. So again, you are welcome to use scopes, whatever you prefer. I just tend to notice that sector based seems to work better. Then we're going to go into, or they looked at their emission sectors. So again, they just looked at their facilities. They chose to break out the streetlights and traffic signals. You guys could lump that together. Whatever you are looking for, again, it's completely customizable. There really isn't anything that's super required except for your methodology. So outlining your data gaps and assumptions. I highly recommend having a table of your total emissions and then have that broken out by sector. And then any sort of like boilerplate language or information that you want to share is going to be very important. So when we're looking at quantifying the emissions here, they looked and chose to look at a quantification methods page. So this is where they decided to break out emissions factors and they decided to explain what that was. So you guys are welcome to do that as well. This is going to be something that you would find in the appendix section of the ICLEI template. We have these tables made in there. You'll have to fill out that information by looking at the factor sets within your ClearPath account. And then this is 2005, so a lot of methodology has changed since this time. So if you are looking at this example, there are some things that aren't going to align with what you're looking at for your current year of 2019. So we just keep moving. So it's like, this one's 14 pages. You guys don't have to make it that long. You can if you want. I believe the ICLEI template's like 20 some pages. So again, you can cut down as needed. And again, they chose to do scope 1, 2, and 3 right here. And that's completely fine. That was definitely all the rage in 2005 when looking at inventories. And then we just look at a quick summary by sector right here. So they see that they did the greenhouse gas in metric tons and then what percentage. So this is something that they chose to add. I do find that this can be pretty beneficial, especially when people are communicating this information to decision makers. They like to see like where the total percent is and how to best pinpoint those emissions. If we keep looking, we just see again some of these graphics that they have here. One thing that we do not have in our template that I also find that people are really interested in is they chunk out the actual sources. So they'll look at electricity, natural gas, gasoline and diesel, and then fuel oil. And then they chose to break that out by the metric tons and then the associated percentage again. Again, this is something that's not required. It's just however you think your community or decision makers are going to interpret the information best or easiest. And then they decided to keep going with some more information on very specific to the sectors, what they're looking at, like the different MMBTU in each area, everything along those lines. And then they wrap up with some graphics and then a nice conclusion. I like that one because it's decently short and to the point. Our next one is for New Pulse. So this one's 2017. So this is a little more updated. It is nice to give credit if you want to. So they put some of those logos down there to show credit. Having that table of contents page and then having those nice bookmarks as we move through it is going to be nice for y'all. So they chose to do an executive summary. I tend to find that executive summaries can be one of two things, either a summary of your actual inventory report that you're going to be talking about in the report and or, hey, New Pulse has done this. We're so good at doing that. We've done X, Y, Z. This is our next thing that we're working on. Kind of like a little show and tell moment is sometimes how I tell, or I can see what people are doing with their executive summaries. So here they also did a, this one looks like it includes quite a few community-wide things because we're looking at residential and commercial energy here, along with agriculture and all of that. So they did a combined inventory here. So this one is going to be longer than all of yours, and it's going to include sectors that are not pertinent to you right now. So they chose to do a small piece on new palts and climate change in general. What does that look like? What is climate change? Explaining everything along those lines. Again, you guys are welcome to borrow from whatever you're looking for to make your report more interesting to you and your community. Here's those milestones. Again, you guys can use them as Kale. I'm just going to reiterate Kale here. If you want to use them, you want to change them, however you're feeling, you're welcome to use it if you want to. Go into that methodology again. So what I consider to be some of the most important information is going to be that methodology, your data gaps and assumptions, making that abundantly clear. I also do find that having the global warming potential or GPW table is pretty important in here as well. So that's one thing I do recommend keeping. And now we see this one is going into community emissions. So I'm just going to breeze past all this as it's not important for this. And we see that they have this very large table right here. This is including all of their sectors that are emitting. So this is community-wide and local government. So as you're looking through this, just make sure to keep that in mind. And then it looks like they exported information from ClearPath and then chose to make graphics using their own colors. Highly recommend doing this. Definitely add your own community's branding to this. It can definitely help add like a little personal touch. Same right here with their sort of graphics they have. Again, more of those tables where it's looking at the usage, so we have the actual fuel type, the units, the usage, and the CO2e. Highly recommend having all this information in your report as well. We're going to keep moving. We're just looking at more of those pie charts that they have. And here we have their actual government information. So this is kind of more what your tables are going to look like as you start creating those for your process. And we see we have those same kind of pie charts in a smaller table right here as well. And then they chose to add a next steps page, and then they start getting into methodology. If you guys want to add a next steps, completely fine, but I do think that your climate action plan is going to spend more time on this. So if you want to set the stage for the climate action plan using next steps, go for it. If not, your climate action plan will cover all of that as well. And then again, most important, I'm beating a dead horse, but methodology, data gaps and assumptions, most important thing that you guys outline in this report. And there we go. Any questions for me? I did go pretty fast, so.
Bound to be more questions as people get more into the process and start writing it. So obviously, feel free to ping us at any time. Sorry, we went a little bit over our hour target today, but at least we can give you back 45, 50 minutes to go work on your report or your data gathering or wherever you are. And thank you again for your time. And just a little plug for Tuesday office hours. Please come on Tuesday at 10 to ask us any questions. Yeah, or just to listen in. Thanks, Kale. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.